Senator Hassan, recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you and the ranking member for holding this hearing. Welcome, Postmaster General. It is good to see you. I want to focus a bit on the ways that you can work to strengthen mail service, and I want to also share my concerns about some of the proposals that you have that would make mail service worse in my state for Granite Staters. The Postal Service has a plan to move some postal operations from Manchester, New Hampshire to Boston. I oppose the plan because implementation of it will harm service and delay delivery. I also oppose moving operations from White River Junction, Vermont to Hartford, Connecticut, because White River Junction serves Granite Staters in the northern part of New Hampshire. We know from Postal Service Inspector General reports that processing center consolidations like the ones you're considering here, including those in Virginia and Georgia, resulted in, quote, an immediate and significant decline in service performance, close quote. And we know, too, that those declines continued for several months and that these facilities are still struggling to meet their on-time delivery goals. I have also repeatedly heard serious concerns from postal employees and customers that your plans would slow delivery service in New Hampshire. And just to be clear, taking a collection center, a processing center from Manchester to Boston moves at least a 2-hour drive time, both from the collection point into the processing center and then back up to New Hampshire. Despite pausing your Manchester and White River Junction consolidation plans earlier this year, you haven't sought an independent analysis of how these plans will impact Granite Staters. So yes or no, will you ask the Postal Regulatory Commission to analyze the service impacts of moving operations from Manchester to Boston and White River Junction to Hartford? And if the Postal Regulatory Commission finds that moving operations from Manchester to Boston or White River Junction to Hartford will cause significant disruptions, will you stop the plan from moving forward?
If you're asking me if I would specifically ask the Postal Regulatory Commission to opine on that specific...
To have an independent analysis done.
Would not.
So you won't have that done. No. I'm going to continue to strongly oppose the plans, especially in the absence of an independent review of the service impacts in New Hampshire, because common sense and my own familiarity with the whole region tells me that this will slow down service in considerable ways. How are you going to continuously monitor service as operations transition from Manchester to Boston or from White River Junction to Hartford? And if and when delays occur, how are you going to rectify them?
That's a good question, and that is something that we have amped up considerably in terms of operational reviews, performance excellence, GIMBers on site, and so forth. So I can tell you that we have people looking at every bit of performance in all of these moves now, when we have response teams ready to to jump in and make the necessary corrections.
Well, what if your monitoring tells you that it was a mistake to take it from Manchester to Boston because it's going to delay delivery in considerable ways?
Again, I'm not, a mistake. You may think it's a mistake, and we may not think it's a mistake. A delay, a change in service, and I don't know the specifics. Of right now off the top of my head in Manchester. We will have a service standard that is good for the whole nation, and we will meet that service standard. Okay?
Well, and because my time is limited, I hear you on that, and I hope you are right, but I believe you aren't. And the reason is, if you slow down collection, if you do collection less frequently, and it takes longer to drive mail from one place to the processing center than it did before, and you're doing less collection, and it's going to take longer to get it back to the state where you need to deliver, my common sense tells me that is going to delay service. Let me move on to another issue.
I think you're double counting some of that time.
Well, since I'm really familiar with the drives, and I'm pretty familiar with the terrain, and I'm listening to my postal employees a lot, because they're really smart people and they're familiar with it too. And I would suggest you might want to talk with them. But let me move on to, Mr. DeJoy, we have limited time. And so I'm going to move on to my next question. While you have focused on making large-scale operational changes, some smaller changes and investment in technology can have significant and positive impacts because they will improve employee safety, they will boost morale, and they will improve customer service. There are two incidents that I want to highlight that demonstrate the need for common sense investments by the service in technology. First, earlier this year, a Nashua, New Hampshire letter carrier was robbed at gunpoint while delivering mail. Thankfully, he was unharmed, but the robbers stole his arrow keys, which are used to access mail collection boxes. Then they used the keys to steal the mail. In response to the rise in attacks on postal employees, letter carriers have called for converting arrow keys to electronic fobs, which could be disabled in the event that the fobs are stolen, preventing further crimes and disincentivizing criminals from stealing them in the first place. So that's one incident. The second incident occurred in Hanover, New Hampshire, where the local post office didn't have access to Wi-Fi for 2 months earlier this year, meaning that the post office was unable to process credit cards to perform basic transactions. As we all know, having reliable internet access is essential for operating a business in this day and age. So will you commit to making common sense investments to improve employee safety and customer service as part of the Delivering for America plan?
The Delivering for America plan is all about making investments in our facilities and modernizing the network, so yes.
Thank you. These are things that letter carriers and other employees have raised, and we've had to push really hard, for instance, on the Wi-Fi issue. So I would look forward to working with you on that. I only have a little bit of time left, but I do want to just raise one more issue. My office regularly receives outreach from constituents asking for our help in resolving the postal issues they're facing. For example, for more than 7 years, a small business owner in Peterborough, New Hampshire, was able to reliably schedule package pickups from her home nearly every day, whether it was 1 package or 30, whether it was rainy or sunny. After her regular mail carrier retired in 2023, the daily pickups became less reliable, and some days they were missed altogether. We hear stories like this all the time, frustrated customers and small business owners who are looking for reliable, consistent service. And when we reach out to our Postal Service customer liaisons or regional management seeking help, we are often met with excuses instead of action, and that's obviously not acceptable. So will you commit to ensuring that your regional management takes a more active role in working with us to resolve issues brought to us by our constituents?
Yeah, I think we do need some work in that area, Senator, and we have aggressively pursuing that.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll also just add that a number of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have felt that sometimes your office's response is lacking when we make inquiries, so I hope very much that we can work on improving that as well. Thank you.
Sure.
Senator Blumenthal, you're recognized for your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for having this hearing.